I'll move. Silence, please. Well, we've got to move a second. All in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. So now I'll then move, so thanks for reminding me of that, Adele Gardner will be a member on this committee in this role now. You have speaking rights.
Thank you.
Do I have a second to that?
Yes, I'll second.
Bruce, all in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. So we can move now on to item 5.1 on page 18. You might move in a second, please.
Yes, I'll move the report to see, John.
I'll second.
Thank you. So we've got to move a second that the Assurance Risk and Finance Committee received the report, May 2021 Risk Management. Comments?
Yeah, I do. Okay.
Yes.
Are the threatening behaviour from members of the public? I think I spoke about this last time. It concerns me that it's increasing, and I am full agreement that it's not acceptable. But I'll take you back to a statement I made last year about the number of people killed by police officers in the States, tens and tens of thousands, and yet there's one city in the States that just doesn't kill people. And what they have is they have basically a de-escalation training in place, where basically effectively they're not killing people in self-defence because nobody's attacking them, then they de-escalate. And so I look at this and I think to myself, if it's increasing, then we need to do something about it. And I think you all noticed in yesterday's newspaper about threatened behaviour in banks. And a bank about to close somewhere in a little town, and they had put cops in there because the locals threatened the staff. It's not their decision. It's just that the locals feel out of control or not in control. And the only person they have to lash out at is the remaining staff in the bank. And one more story quickly. I went to a restaurant. I got bad meal, and so I didn't tip the waiter because he was the only person I could really complain at, right? And so I look at this and I think to myself, is there a larger problem here? I mean, if the people who are more public facing than others are getting threatened, is it because our general society is getting more threatened? Is there an elevated level of frustration with the council that the only people can take their frustration out on are those that they see? And I think we need to have that discussion. Well, no, we don't have to need the discussion, but I think that discussion needs to be had by the staff who are looking at this behaviour. I mean, one of the most frustrating behaviours, and it hasn't happened here, but I remember speaking on the phone once, and the person down the other end said something that bugged me, and my voice rose, and I got a little bit faster. You could tell I was a little bit agitated. I didn't think I was out of control. And the woman basically says, "I will not speak to you when you're speaking like that." She hung up. And it's that kind of. She gave permission to do that because threatening behaviour from the public is not acceptable. So me slightly raising my voice and speaking quicker to her, she had power over me, and then bang. And that there is not, that there just drove me wild, right? Okay. And while I haven't experienced it here in this organisation, I have had complaints from the community of similar kinds of things taking place. So I'll just go back to the city in the United States who went from killing thousands of people to killing nobody through de-escalation. Can we look at that side of the equation rather than what are we doing, or what could we do rather than simply defending ourselves from an elevating violent society?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Sean, quick follow.
I'm happy to talk to that.
Yes.
Through you, Chair. So at the moment we've got conflict resolution and awareness training that we've actually just finished rolling out to 78 of our frontline staff. So that's giving them the tools and the strategies to deal with those ever-increasing threatened behaviour stories. To date, we haven't had any physical altercations. A lot of these are generally verbal, and that goes with, guess a lot of the services that we're interacting with public are as final demands, rates increases, so traditionally has a negative spin on it from the outset. I think with what we've got in place for staff currently at the moment is more than acceptable, and coupled with the loan training and other security devices that we're rolling out, we've got that further level of protection for staff as well, in dealing potentially with threatening members of the public.
I guess my point was we shouldn't only be looking at the defensive things, but proactive in terms of how the reputation, I guess, how the organisations perceived.
Yeah, you made the point quite well. Yeah. And training in terms of what can be done, de-escalation. Yeah. Any other comments? Thanks.
Yeah,
Bruce.
sorry, John, just
Don't follow this, no,
I'm conscious that you're keen to. Actually, before I ask a question, I'll just make one comment. I was very interested in the group risk or the response under the groups to the issue of risks. And I was very impressed with the IM8 weekly risk management questions. And I'd like to suggest, John, that we as a committee should be firstly encouraged by that sort of behaviour, if I can call it risk behaviour at a group level, and actually be encouraging its universal adoption. If I can put it that way, I think that's tremendous. If the group is sitting down and asking those questions 1 through 6 and the subsequent ones, that makes a lot of sense to me, which is really great. Yeah. One of the things that I am interested in, though, given we're dealing with health and safety, is at the top of page 20, one of the reasons for its increasing negative trend, in other words, getting redder, is increasing due to delays in progressing treatments. In other words, we've identified treatments, but we're slow to do it. Could I just ask Alistair what those are, please?
Sorry, was that the reason for the...
Yeah. So, well, I'm trying to understand what are the treatments that we are slow to get to market with, and what can we do about it?
So at the moment, the key vulnerabilities that are not to plan, so the lone working project, we've just done the final install and trainings from next week. Delays for those have been COVID related, but also having the providers come up and help without fitting out the technology and also delivering on the training. We have that on plan to finish by the end of this financial year, which was always a project plan. Our non-compliance with our assets, budget's now being approved for those variations to complete those 2 final ones, which has been on vulnerabilities plan for close to 8 months now, but that's work that's going into capital projects through Andy's team. The other activities in terms of our contractor management is an ongoing vulnerability for us because we rely so heavily on contractors to deliver our work. That for me is one of the risk areas because we don't in-house everything. We outsource the majority of all our services, and where we require and relying on those third parties that even subcontract further down. Once you put that position in place, you lose that ability to influence. So that piece for me is really where we need to develop a lot more.
I'm listening there. Do we have any the subcontractors working are on PCBU, it's combined PCBU, as you said, we can't transfer our PCBU status.
Correct.
Why don't we just say you've got to be accredited to be able to work for us?
So we do that now
for a contractor. Why are we not 100% rather than 84?
So we do put pre-qualification through as our process, and that's for that tier 1 supplier. But often what we're doing now is they're delivering work that they'll substitute down to a subcontractor to deliver, say, the trenching part or the plumbing part. It's having the ability to actually make sure that their pre-qual is part of that as well, because when they tender, they're tendering as themselves, not necessarily as the subcontractors that end up delivering the work. So that management piece during that tendering and award phase is really key, that we work with our partners.
I might be seeing this a bit naively. We can't, just because they use a subcontractor who is not pre-qualified, that doesn't remove any liability from us.
Correct.
So we should be worried about the fact that 84% are qualified.
We always worry about the subcontractors that aren't pre-qualified.
It's much better than it was, and we're able to follow
It
it.
hasn't
84 so far.
Improved.
Got any?
But with things like social procurement, where we're looking more and more at what we call tier 3 and tier 4 smaller suppliers, getting them up to speed to make sure that they've got the minimum in place, which is where we're pushing with pre-qual as well, the challenges for us.
It's got cold in here.
And what would be our situation if actually, so actually no, let me track it back the other way.
Thanks,
So do we have any reported incidences with contractors who are not pre-qualified? Are there any incidences, near misses, actual, I don't know, service strikes, all the sorts of things that go with contracting? Are we getting evidence of those sorts of incidents coming through?
So we haven't had any instance of a non-pre-qualified subcontractor, because often what we had with the Hobson Street one, for example, Ventia is the tier 1 contractor that was with that contract. A subcontractor was involved in an incident, so they put that up to the level of the tier 1. So we don't have any specific instance of subcontractors that aren't pre-qualified having accidents or injuries.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other comments? I have one. It's just to do with the health and safety actually. Page 25, both the same. And I note that you've got mine worker safety 1, progress not to original plan 2 and 3 and 5, all not to original plan plus 7. Can you comment on that? Are we falling behind in what we're planning to do, given that it's such a high risk, health and safety, or is general comment, please?
Through you, Chair. So we have fallen behind on some of the original plans, certainly for the lone worker. With the delays with COVID and actually rolling some of those programs out, it was purely just the ability to get those closed out while we were in lockdown level, just that pushed us back. I don't believe we're exposed by not having the majority of the other vulnerabilities to plan. There's remedies in place and they will be closed out.
Yep. Okay, that's the last bit I wanted to hear, that we're not adding any additional risk to what we're doing. Good. Any other comments? No? Right, put it to the vote. All in favour of receiving the report? Aye, against? No, carried. Item 5.2. General insurance recommendation update, page 32. Come over the level of please. Yep, Bruce, I'll second it. It's on page 32.
Just an aside, last meeting we talked about the structure, communication structure of the internal auditor with respect to.
Yeah, to give you an update on that.
Yeah, I just want to know where that was up to.
Yeah, that's in process. We've got been looked at externally with external parties, which is recent, and out of that we'll get feedback probably either the next 16th of June. So that's what we'll be doing. Great. Yeah. No other comments? No comments? Anything missing? So I was going to ask you a question. Is there some other we should keep? Is there anything else we should put in the general audits that we're planning here?
Can I raise a question that came out of this morning's I don't know if this is the right place, but I'm going to raise it anyway. We were discussing the proposed high-yield water treatment plant, and this is in committee, so I'm going to be a little bit careful about what I say here. But in the body of the report, it does say that resourcing for this work is significant and will reduce available staff capacity to undertake other activities. And I don't think it'll be ERC, but I'm just wondering now if it's appropriate to bring it up at this point that do we have visibility? Are we comfortable that we have governance, visibility and comfort around the capability of this organisation to do what it is that we're asking them to do? Particularly in regard to 3 water compliance.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, Councillor Court.
I'm not sure that it's appropriate here though.
But yeah, given that, as you alluded to, we have an item coming up, so probably not.
And I don't have the full list of audit recommendations.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know whether it falls into one of those at all.
But in
I
terms
don't
of,
want to make it about 3 words to say it. I'm talking more at a high
level.
that, you know, we've got a report here that's telling us that we don't have the capacity within this organisation, or suggesting strongly that we don't have the capacity in this organisation to respond within our current means.
Yep.
That is a risk. And
Well,
it's something that I think we need to capture somewhere.
yeah,
From the previous paper.
I'll ask Will to comment on that, please, Will.
Thank you, Chair. I reflected on the issue this morning raised by the Deputy Mayor and by Mike tangentially as well. And I think the issue, it's not an easy one, but we've got finite resources. I was particularly looking at the issue that the Deputy Mayor raised because there's engagement involved in there, there's Tihonal involved in there, very finite resources that have to be spread quite thinly. It's our role as people leaders, from the Chief Executive to the General Managers through to our supervisory levels, to ensure that we can match the need when required. And it's through the LTP process that we would come back to you and say that we don't have the resources that we need to do something, and therefore seek your guidance. We'll never have enough resources to do everything that we want to do. And the Deputy Mayor is right, because you're like a stick of rock. You're consistent all the way through when you always make the point that for every task that we carry out, there's a lesser priority that has to be tackled. So I think through my concluding comment on this, Chair, would be through the committee structure, we need to report back to you any persistent shortfalls where we simply cannot match the demand, where demand exceeds supply.
And I think it was raised, I think Bruce, you raised that early on, I'm not sure when, that delivering on a long-term plan essentially does fall in the category. Do we have the resources to deliver?
Yeah, look, I actually, again, you raised a really good point, and it's one that actually this committee should always have its eye on. I think probably we could think, at the risk of making more, we should actually see something a bit more. Actually, it's quite relevant because within the is it what do we call that, task or item or point 123? It's on page 35 and 36 of our agenda under the audit management report. Amongst a number of things around deferral, they've also got down there, I take it Andy, Project Darwin, which I think is about looking at things, but they're also just reflecting at the end there that the capital program is challenging. That's what I've taken from that. And we also have it actually in the previous item about the big risks, where it's one of the 3 that Tanya's paper highlighted as being a risk. And I would think, Anne, that actually what you just read out should be of concern to us as a risk committee in terms of delivery. I'm sure the infrastructure committee and the others have got their hands direct on this, but at a high organisational level, this has got to be one of the big risks. And I would suspect, and I'm not wanting in any way to discourage transparency, but also signalling to the auditors for our LTP, good reason to actually provide comment inside the LTP that there are questions about our ability to deliver.
Thank you.
So I think actually it should be something, John, that we have greater visibility over. So Anne's quite right.
So let's make a note of that. And Sean?
Just to provide context, so look, this is odd, isn't it? Because you expect staff to be pushing for more staff, because the more staff, the more space, the more capacity, the more reasonable work hours, and elected members to be pushing back. It's much more traditional. This is quite interesting what's going on here. Vet council is something I very personally and deliberately want to avoid, as we frequently have. So the context for this is that every organisation has resource tensions, and strangely some of that is quite a good thing, because when you are having to work to the wire, really clever, efficient and expedient sometimes decisions can be made and justified, and you cut out a lot of the fat. I've worked in really organisations with heaps of capacity, and they completely fill the available space by creating work for themselves and getting super thorough on analysis and the like, to the point we just wonder why they would do those things. So we're running a lean operation here, and we very deliberately, voluntarily bring back to elected members any sort of increase in our staffing numbers that give that sort of relief, which we have done 3 times now. And since I've been here, despite my best efforts, we have grown from 356 to 386. The latest being 3 weeks ago, when NTA got 3 extra staff for better roading capacity. I will not stand here and say that Andy Finch does not need more people, because he does. And also we know that there's pressure on the reserves officer and sports representation issue at the moment. So I would like to come back to you with a 4th sort of ask. But this is, to address Bruce's point and Anne's, this is the most daily managed risk for the SLT, is capacity. So we started 4 years ago with complete review of this council structures. About 3/4 of it was completely restructured, trying to find more efficient ways to use the people that we had. And it wasn't until we got to the end when we thought, actually, there's bugger all slack. Then we went into council mode and we did 34 projects that were all about capability and capacity generation inside council. And we're really happy with how that turned out. And then on top of that, we've had to ask for some margins of increase despite our best efforts to try and work it internally. Everything that's in the LTP and the annual plan, we've got the people and money for. The last time Andy and I met on this, which was probably 3 months ago, Andy, I think we generated a list of about 10 things that were really big that were completely outside of that plan. And that's really what he's talking about when he puts paragraphs like that into reports, is we just stuck to, if it was a simple linear place and we could stick to plan, we'd have the resources. But when we throw Kaka Street in there and erosion on the south coast of Hokianga and what to do about that, and what to do with Matauri X project up north, every time we do that, it's another 3 people for another week. And Andy is right to signal that to foreshadow from time to time there might be a priority discussion and some deprioritisation of things that you thought were important. So bottom line, that is constantly managing resource tensions. There may be a conversation if we hit the wall on what might be done, and we may be back to ask for a small number of new things shortly.
We can carry on, because we can.
No, that's
great. So thanks for the feedback, and it's been noted what Councillor Court's raised. So and Bruce emphasised as well. So thanks. No other comments?
Everything in the LTP we have people and money for. We didn't hear that this morning. We did not hear that. We heard from a 3-word statement that said we simply do not have the capacity to do that.
Yeah.
There are a number of councillors in the room who heard that, so I'm not inventing this, that's what they heard. And from time to time, LTP projects will be prioritised. Well, that needs a governance decision. So I'm signalling now that I want visibility of that, particularly in light of central government reform that we're having to respond to immediately, particularly in the free water space or the housing space, that is taking staff resource of what governments have directed this organisation to do through the LTP. we need to be able to quantify that and have a considered conversation about whether we agree with you, Mr Chief Executive, or we want to employ more staff, Mr Chief Executive, we want to contract out, whatever the
And Greg, you made the point very well. And that's something that does concern me, especially the Three Waters, and I've raised that with Sean and others regarding what are we actually facing there. I think it's quite a significant piece of work that we need to look at, and again, that requires more resources. And I'll just remind everybody that number 4 on our risk register is the affordability. So we do have a pretty tight balancing act to do with all of these things, but that's where it's at the moment, and it's not allowed to some of these challenges. Any other comments on this report? Not, I'll put it to the vote. All in favour? Carried. So item 5.3 on page 38, that the Assurance Risk and Finance Committee received the level of service KPI quarterly performance report. There's been a seconder.
Ellie.
Okay, seconder. I'll second it then. Comments on the quarterly report?
My only comment is that as we're coming into a long-term plan, there are some level of service changes. So it would be, I don't know if we're going to see it appraised totally, or if community boards have had any update on that. There was a report produced to the Regulatory and Compliance Committee with items that are relevant to our purview, but I'm not sure if that's going to relate infrastructure as well.
Community board chairs are here. Do you want to comment on what Councillor Stratford said?
I'll send you a copy of it. For
Yep.
Most of the level of service changes proposed under regulatory, district services, environmental improvements. So we've performed really well on some of our areas. So we've increased the performance measure.
We're going to get somebody to respond to complaints about signs on the corner of intersections, sightlines.
The footpath signs, I've got that down on my list. Yeah, won't be today.
That's okay. I can go back to these people who've been your main mistakes. We're on to it.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Stratford. Any other comments to the report? Councillor Stratford, views. Make sure infrastructure's got that.
Your infrastructure wants to look at the services.
Follow that up.
See if you're changing anything.
Any other specific comments to this report? No? That's all good. Great. I actually don't even know this one. So I'll put it to the vote. All in favour? Right. Carried. Was that a brief? Did you want to say something?
No, I said aye, you put it to the vote.
Right, sorry. So item 5.4, page 61, moving a second on that, that the Assurance Risk and Finance Committee received a report, Council Financial Report for the period ending 31st of March 2021. Move a second. Bruce? Yeah, I'll second that. So Bruce,
Actually, I went to indeed the previous item we were talking about, which is where we're at in our CapEx delivery program, where we anticipate on being in terms of the year, to be honest. So I just need to find it carefully. It's towards the bottom of the report. Let me get you on, please. It's on page the capital delivery against budget and total years program. I was just wondering whether we were happy with that position.
Considering we've got a lot of PGF to deliver, it's a little skewed.
So I'm looking here, Janice, or Andy, at page 72, which has got the council financial performance statement with capital expenditure. And it's not said with any particular moral judgment or weight. I was just to know whether you were happy with the performance today in terms of capital delivery.
Can I make a comment on that, through the
Yes.
chair?
Yeah, Janice?
We're working with the asset at the moment as part of our paper for deliberations, and some of the PGF money will move from this year to next year. So the forecast number in here will go down by about 12 million.
Oh,
The
okay.
time we've moved some of the Tehiku, the domain, and some of the roads, because they're going to straddle the year end, so we're moving them into year one.
I can also comment in terms of the overall capital programme. Then I think I'd say, is it perfect? Will we achieve 100%? Then clearly no. And that's, with the business as usual capital programme, the PGF capital programme, it's a massive ask for this year. However, I can confirm that we will increase the percentage of the capital programme that's been delivered again this year. So that's been a year-on-year improvement. So the trajectory is heading in the right direction. The team have been challenged with trying to get to 100%. If we do get to 100%, then Bruce will probably comment that we're probably the only council that will ever achieve that. But we are heading in the right direction. And there will be significantly more spent this year than there was spent last year.
Thank you.
John, my other question, I think this is appropriate to ask with Janice, is I was just looking at our debt maturity profile on page 82, which is useful. I was just wondering, in terms of any external advice you've received, Janice, as to the strategy we should take, particularly we've got $10 million coming up. Leave it not so bad in the coming couple of years. Anything in terms of strategy and the nature of the instruments, the length and the interest rate interest rate management we should put in place.
So through you, Chair, we are repaying 10 mil on the 17th. We will only be replacing that with 5, and the current position is that we'll take that until 2024. Based on the low rates we've got on the OCR at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Any view from our advisors as to the rates may or may not go?
They're not anticipating a shift at the moment.
So anticipates to be benign. Okay, that's good.
Thank you. Thanks, Bruce. That's good. Just something that Councillor Stratford raised before with the PGF funding again. So even though we're tracking below at the moment, and there is what I'm expecting is what you're saying there, Janice, that we're shifting things around. We're probably pretty close to on target. Is that a fair assessment, just listening to the comments being made? Dropping it by 12 months?
Yeah, the 105.2 will go down by about 12.5 million, so that will go down to what, 87?
Yeah, and looking at how we're tracking, that means we've got a target that's much more feasible than you had.
Yeah, I mean, roading will bring in a big chunk between March and the end of June, bearing in mind these numbers are to March.
Right, thank you.
And roading are on track to practically fully spend programme this year, I believe. The issue we've got is around the 3 strategic roads, and we thought they'd be done by June, but they will now be December, I think, or one of them anyway.
So, great. I think that's all good. Yes, Councillor Stratford, you have something?
The funds going on to the debt, is it from the current cash at bank, or is it coming from the GST, from the write-offs?
We haven't written anything off yet.
Councillor Stratford?
Thank you, Chair. On page 67, due to the increase in local tourist district, income received from the hooking and ferries has steadily increased. I just want to comment on that. Are we at any risk of losing the subsidy that we get from central government in that space because we're getting more money there? How does our contract work? What happens? We obviously budget that we expect to get a certain amount and we're getting more than that. is there a case here that if we see it level off, that it is always going to be higher, that can influence the actual fees and charges that we have on there, that they could potentially decrease for locals?
Yeah, good question. I think, Andy, you want to respond to that? Or?
I can't.
Are you talking about road?
So if I can respond to NTA, no one here? No. From what I heard, so now I'm going by memory, which is a bit scary, but from what I heard, no, that you won't be, there's not that risk of losing the subsidy. So it's actually in the contract, I believe, what it is. If we make a higher profit, I think they share that profit. So, something like that.
What is the project?
Talking about the ferry income. So if we are making a profit, we don't, the subsidy is not key to our, that's what it is.
And my understanding, I'm happy to take it, come back to you offline, is NZTA subsidise the operational loss element only in terms of subsidy.
Yes, if we make a profit, but they will subsidise it.
If we make a profit, then there's no loss for them to subsidise.
That's right. So it's, so there is that, but that's built into the contract, I understand, so there's no risk of losing it as such. In fact, making money, that's great because of the impact on the local community for the visitors we've had, people to grow. All right, any other comments on the report? I have one question. It's not so much to the report, if I can do that. It's targeted at Andy, probably, and that is the risk with NTA funding in our roading budgets. Given they've signalled that they may not have the income to share around as they have in the past. Is that something?
So through the chair, then we did have a short debate about that at the previous meeting. We don't have a clear picture at the moment around what that looks like. So the long-term plan is currently being predicated around full funding in terms of the application to look forward. We had an initial indication that the funding for Shiny New Stuff, the new projects, was going to be cut back significantly, anything over $2 million. That moratorium seems to be extended or being extended back into low-cost, low-risk category, which effectively means the smaller projects may not get the amount of funding they asked for. To mitigate the risk, we don't know what the settlement figure is going to be at this point. We may not know definitively until September, which is after the LTP period, which is clearly a timing issue and a presentational issue for my finance colleague in terms of the documents we're preparing. But I have asked that the roading asset management plan and the roading asset managers present to this committee and prepare documentation that reflects the impact of any reduced funding on levels of service or condition of the network.
Thanks, Andy. I'm going to ask you another question now. And that is there anything we can do to mitigate against that? Maybe Councillor Court can respond as well, given it's a state of flux. And what I'm thinking about, hinting about, is that what does it mean in terms of the plans we've got for our roading work and maintenance too, I guess, if that's affected, and therefore what should we do and how can we respond now that potentially can make a difference? And I'll give one example. Signalling our intention with some of our, I guess roading CapEx work or not, would that actually make a difference? I'm sort of throwing it out there that maybe we could be considering some options here that rather than just sitting and waiting for government to come back to us with what they're going to do.
So through the chair then, clearly we will be looking to use best asset management principles in terms of ensuring that we lobby and identify the need to retain maintenance and operational funding as much as possible. The first premise of this is looking after what you've got before you build anything nice and new, and that's the ongoing process. In terms of other mitigation, then of course there is the option that elected members can take, and that's to invest 100% local share into projects if they choose to do so. But that is a painful and significant impact in terms of
financial
rates, and I clearly would not endorse that at this point because actually we don't know what we're going to be funded for.
Yes. So thank you. Yeah.
Just to add to Andy's statement, it's probably a really good role for elected members if the worst scenario occurs, because the low cost risk budget is 14 million on this year's budget, and if they're saying that the worst scenario for 3 years running is that we could get only 1/3 of that approved, then 2/3 of it is work not done, and we would expect to come back to you with a blank sheet of paper and say, the 2/3, pretend $11 million of the program, of which 1/3 is our part of it, 2/3 is the subsidy. We've basically got a bucket of $3.5 million to do what would have been $11 million worth of work. Let's start from scratch. Which bit do you want done unsubsidised under duress? Anyway, it might be a 3 years running, so it's quite a big deal. It's a complete rewrite. I know you're impatient for an answer, but it's on board because it's a really, really big deal.
Not impatient for an answer. I've actually raised the issue because I think it is a big risk. I think that's probably the same in many other councils around New Zealand, big as that. And we just needed to raise it, and we probably out of this, it's off the report, so I want to get back to that, and that's my fault, so I apologise, but just want to raise it, that's all. Any other comments on the report? No, I'll put it to the vote. All in favour? Against? Carried. So if we can go to item 5.4 then, so 5.5 I believe it is.
Yes, please.
Page 87. Move it to second, please.
I'll move that.
Second, Mike, and the second. Yes, thank you. Comments? Thoughts, questions?
How much bad press, if any, have we got about sending this many people to conference of the committee boards? I mean, the reason we didn't want to send any more was that it was going to be massive bad press. But I'd like to know whether there was any sent this.
You got a reaction?
No? Okay, cool.
If I can comment, because so this is a public meeting, and I think it's worth that the public actually have some comment on this. One of the key things, and maybe I'm the one that's been pushing hardest for it, is to look at better governance skills. And so the objective was to, and going to the conference is not a junket, it's actually part of that training, and that's part of that networking. And when we look forward to your report and the others that have been, I'm sure that you'll see that there's a lot that you've learned out of that. So having elected members going on specific training and going once in the term, that's what we asked for, to one of the conferences, I think is money worth investing in. And I know a number have been on training courses, how valuable it is. In fact, I just came back from a training course on the risk essentials done by the Institute of Directors, and it was a really good course. And I'd recommend anybody that's interested in risk to do that. But in fact, it's so good, I think we're looking at trying to get training here in turn for the rest of the committee at some point. Adele.
I just want to give you some information. The community board conference is now only going to be held once every 3 years.
Really?
Yes. That's...
Yeah, no, we basically decided that it was because there were some CBEC committees that had organised 2, others only had organised 1, and the difficulty of having it across a changed CBEC was too great. So, and there was the whole problem of people having 2 opportunities in one term and having the second opportunity not well well attended, so we decided maybe every 3 months once.
Okay.
I think.
Maddie.
Can I come in here, John?
Yes, you can, Matty, sorry, Richard.
A couple of questions. One, who makes the decisions on which councillor goes on what courses? Who makes those decisions?
I'll get, looking around, I'll get see Sean to respond.
I'm going to ask Will Taylor to follow on because he's got a little process for this. Maddie, we're quite proud of the fact that we put a budget aside for you guys at all. It's up to you to use or not, but I think other councils are going to follow our lead on developing elected members and getting them through a deliberate development program. So we're giving ourselves thumbs up until we hear some negative press. But just to let you know, we are discerning. I won't give names or conferences, but the Mayor, the Deputy and I recently turned down a couple of applications to go to a conference from elected members. That's because the billets were filled. We normally have a couple go to each of the key conferences and we were oversubscribed, so we do say no. As for the more training orientated stuff, I'll just hand over to Will, who's got a system that he runs for us.
Through you, Chair, thank you very much to Sean for that introduction. We introduced a system last year which LGNZ Equip have said is industry best practice, and it's trying to identify training needs gaps. So rather than just send out a normal questionnaire, Caroline Roast and I have met with every elected member who wanted to meet, and we've discussed their training needs. And sorry, I'm going to pick on Councillor Tippania again as an example in this case. Working with Councillor Tippania, we identified a need for what was a relatively expensive media course, but we analysed Councillor Tippania's need and the gap that we felt this training would provide. And I think that's a shining example of the bang for the buck that the council under Rapier gets, because Councillor, I kind of keep up with the number of interviews that Councillor Tippania has now churned out. But last count, I think it was 150 odd radio interviews. But after yesterday, I'm sure that figure's got somewhat higher. But that's just an example of the mechanism that we now use, Chair. It really is. It's bespoke and it is industry best standard.
But you haven't met. You have.
Yep.
Carry on.
You have never met with elected members on what courses they go on. I've been a councillor for 10 years and I have never been once asked to go on a conference, which doesn't worry me. It's just the fairness of all this. I've got a good example here, and I'm not attacking this council, but Felicity Foy recently went on a New Zealand Planning Institute conference. Now, she has a personal, her personal job is planning. And the ratepayer has to pay $2,534. Now, she has a profession in planning. Shouldn't she be paying that?
Matty, what people have been on courses, I think is not appropriate. What do you mean? What are you talking about? Come back to you on this. We know she's been on those courses, but I don't want you challenging, someone who's not here in motives. But that question of yours will be answered. I think you want to answer a question.
Could I very quickly just turn to the issue about verifying what bang for the buck that we get when it comes to training and development as opposed to conferences? A good example again would be Councillor Tippania that Caroline and I interviewed local after he'd been on the course to see what value he got from it, and we were able to discern from that he could empirically demonstrate what value he got from that. So we do follow up after training to see what value has been got for the ratepayer.
I think, Maddie, if I can, Chair, there are two mechanisms that you can employ, and from what my experience, one is from my sit down with Will that I responded to his email to say I would like to have, and we identify the areas I would like to develop as an elected member. Him and Caroline then went away and looked for some that I could have. But the other one that I have, for example, for our Te Maruata conference, is I have asked that I want to go there. So I've actually taken the step to message through the Democracy Services that this conference is on and I would like to attend that. And I think that when we look here, we see like the community board conference that is here. I'm guessing, Mike, that it was you or who, it wasn't council who approached you to ask if you wanted to go, you approached council.
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
Yeah, so, Matty, there's a process in
There's a simple, hang on, John, hang on, just listen. There's a simple way out here, very simple. What the hierarchy should do is put up a program, put an agenda up and say, these are the courses that we're going to have this year to the elected members. Simple. And say, right, give it to them in a written form and say, and let them make a decision which course they want to go. That's the simplest way of doing it. Well, this is just a joke to me.
Yeah, Matty.
I think that Maddie is right, because
just a joke.
If we know what
That's
courses are on, we go and ask for permission for work or conferences. We ask to go on them. But if you don't know, then you don't know.
So what I was going to say, Matty, there is, I got approached, and I'm sure other elected members got approached about what courses you want to go on. So if you're not aware, then we most certainly can provide Christmas dinner. We most certainly can provide you with a list of courses, and that's a good idea. And
too, Maddie, there is an opportunity anytime to sit with the Democracy Services team, Caroline in particular, and work on your professional development plan. I understand the offer has been put out there to elected members previously. Some have taken it up and others haven't, but there is always an opportunity. So the team would be happy to sit with you and go through your needs.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I did actually have a question about what constitutes sensitive expenditure in our report. It's where there may be perceived personal benefit, and I know that it's nothing, but for example, the name badges for elected members are sensitive expenditure in this Dropbox, but obviously the printing of all of our reports, which must be a massive bill for all the paper we use, is it? Where's the balance? Because I wouldn't see name badges, which are a part of the role, just like getting an agenda as a part of the role, would be sensitive.
So Maddie, I think that answers your question. Can someone please contact Matty? We'll find out what courses that you would like to go on. I'm sure that...
Look, John, it hasn't answered my question. Let's be realistic. As I said, I've been a councillor for 10 years. I've been around. And in my time as a councillor, I have noticed the perks on various councils. I'm sorry to say that, but it's a fact. On where they go, what courses they go on, etc., etc. Just put up a sheet, as Kelly has just mentioned, so we all know about these courses, and then we can apply to go. It's simple.
Yep. Yeah, we'll do that.
This hasn't been done.
What we're also doing in this report that emphasises that is we're putting out there every course that people have been on and the expenditure, so that it is public and making it available. And as I said before, I think it's a great thing to have the training, and encourage elected members in their governance role to get training.
Through you, Mr. Chair, can I just point out that we do have the elected members policy, so perhaps we need to get a copy of that policy through to Councillor Radish.
Yep.
And the policy specifies that one may attend one training and one conference per year, but it has to be related to your role. So they're certainly not perks for any member of the public that's listening. They are really intense, and you are required to provide a written report back to council at the conclusion of that opportunity to advise the ratepayers what benefits to the district you are returning from that opportunity.
Excellent, thank you. All right, no other comments on this report? All in favour of receiving the report?
Aye.
Thank you. Against? Carried. So, page 89, item 5.6. Can I move a seconder that the Assurance Risk and Finance Committee receive the report, council decision, tracking assessment for the 20 calendar year?
Yep.
Thank you. Mr. Stratford, seconder. I'll second it then. So here's the council decision tracking assessment for the year. Comments, please.
This is a fairly new report, isn't it? I'm wondering if it's picking up on our requests in the past for all the list of recommendations that we've wanted to keep track of. Yes. So yeah, I like the pie graph, but I think we still need a list that we can find perhaps in the elected members lounge online so we can see them. Remember, if there's a by-election tomorrow, new elected members know what recommendations we're waiting on. We're not sitting here in 3 years' time going, why didn't we do Sweetwater? Which is just an example of one of the decisions that we've made, as not this council, previous council have made and not, had momentum of. Yeah. Thank you.
Including the 2007 Kerikeri structure plan.
Yes.
Yeah. So one of my comments on this one, I think it's good that we got the 60. It looks quite good. The 92% completed it looks good, but what I'd love to see outstanding ones probably being the key thing. Member Edmonds was alluding to. So if we can actually see that way, I think is a better indication, because if it's something that's not outstanding, well then why don't report on it. It's not an exception. But it's looking pretty good. So comments on this, because I could be off beam on what I'm saying there.
Yes, sure, I'm happy to comment on this.
Yes.
So yes, Democracy Services have this as a work in progress, and this is a new report, and it is being adapted, I guess, as we go along. So any bits of feedback that we can take back and revamp the next report, we are,
I think it's good.
like to receive those either today or any time.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. At least it's good. Comment?
Oh yeah, just further to what I said, the local government stipulates that there's meant to be a list, a track kept of decisions made. That's what we're seeking.
Thank you. Great. Right, I'm going to put this to the vote then. All in favour?
Aye.
Okay, that brings us to the end of the public section, and now I want to move with the public excluded. I'll move. Do I have a seconder? Thanks. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried.
good mood today, though.
Why is that?
I don't know.
Yeah, but give him a 10 out of 10, I don't think so. But never mind. But he is in a good mood.
And we are live.
Great, I'll close our meeting. May the sanctity of this meeting resound within the walls of these chambers and within the walls of our minds. Ko te tapu o ngā kōrero ka erihia ki ngā whātua o tēnei whare, ki ngā koko mahara tutu o te kamawa kia tīna, haungi e, hui e, tai. Kia ora.
Thank you.
Well, just